Putting money into products is always something that comes up, especially when you're trying to decide whether you want to be a part of a hobby or not. It could be as simple as investing in a pair of pants or a basketball, or even as expensive as buying a whole set of golf clubs. But today we're talking about card games, and that's going to be the focus of our series, as Budget Busters is more figuring out if certain products coming out are worth the money that you're investing into. And we're going to be taking a dive at this for Digimon, as we're going to be looking at the brand new ST20 and ST21 structure decks, and we're going to be talking about if they are a budget buster or are they just a bust together. But guys, if you don't know, my name is Brad, and at the Ad Army, we are always focused on making sure we help out the community. So when you are part of the Ad Army, just remember, when you sub up or like the video or leave a comment down below, it does help out in growing the community and making the content better. But I didn't want to mention that, as many people might just be looking at this video for the first time, wondering what this is about or my channel. So pretty much I'm just putting it out there that there is a lot of content here. And if you're a beginner, this is also great for you, as we are trying to focus on making sure that for all the adventure-based videos, that they're focused more on the beginning aspect of the game so that you can onboard yourself into the Digimon community and make it a bit easier for you. But with all that being said, we're going to be jumping straight into the structure decks and talking about if they're a budget buster, or like I said before, just a bust. So jumping into it right now, let's look at the structure decks. So when we look at what the structure decks actually offer, we have a little bit of interesting information here. Pretty much these are the beginning decks. They are starter decks in all intents and purposes. Many a times in different card games, it is mentioned whether a deck is a starter deck, which is meant to be for beginners and people who have never played the game before, and i.e. the structure decks, which are designed for the aspect of people who have maybe played the game a bit more and understand the mechanics, and then are able to build a strategy, as they are a little bit more difficult than, say, a beginning strategy. However, thanks to Digimon kind of reincorporating this design into the structure decks here for Digimon, it's a pretty interesting mix when we look at the ST20 and ST21 structure decks, which are very much designed to be a structure deck in terms of not really having the aspect of a simplified strategy, or at least like basic mechanic strategy. But in the case of a starter deck, these decks are absolutely designed for the people who maybe have either only played Digimon a little bit or interested in playing. There is also a little bit of nostalgia baiting, which I will mention now if you have been a Digimon fan, because these are focused around the original series in Digimon Adventure. So I did want to mention that, because that is definitely a key factor when we're looking at a budget buster, whether it's actually aiming for a specific audience or is it really just trying to exist at all, which is something a lot of companies that are doing card games or different hobbies have. Sometimes they just make products so it's here so that maybe people will buy it. They don't always make it with the direct intention of being a masterpiece in terms of money, but that is usually the case. But with the structure deck and looking at their contents, we have a lot of interesting things. The main thing you'll notice is that they both come with their own set of specific eggs, which is the level 2s. Additionally, you have a roster of rookies, champions, and ultimates, and you do even have level 6s, which are the megas. They are Ace Digimon too, so that is an aspect to look at. Additionally, you have a whole roster of options, and what I'm calling field options, which are the ones that kind of act like field spells or have lasting effects in which you put them into your security, by i.e. removing the bottom security card, so you'll see them later. And additionally, we actually have access to reprint cards in the form of the scramble cards, so that is another additional thing to look at. Now, when we actually look at what you're investing into, you're basically investing into a brand new strategy. The adventure archetype itself has never really been printed outside of these structure decks at any capacity, and the adventure as a trait word has now been introduced into the game thanks to these structure decks. And this is kind of the key factor here, is that you're basically paying for a brand new strategy which hasn't seen the light of day and will now be a part of this specific deck. So if you wanted to pick these up, this is technically a budget buster in the form of, if you want to play this deck, you do have to pick up these structure decks to play them. Yes, you can buy singles, but the point here is you still want to play this, you still have to pick up the actual decks, so that is very important. Additionally, when we look at the contents that I've been talking about before, you have a wide array of effects. You also have different colors, which are uniquely designed here, because unlike most of the other starter decks that have existed prior, many of them have always been mono to dual color typing, which is usually the focus of the deck, whether they're like a solid green or yellow in the case of the Fabled Waltz and the Vortex Warrior structure deck. However, here we are finally seeing an amalgamation deck, which is usually what we see in Digimon. So for beginners, Digimon can have special evolution requirements denoted by the little black bar they have on them if they possess them, which allows them to specifically digivolve on Digimon that meet those requirements. requirements. So in the case of the structure decks, they actually all share the adventure trait, so that's the key thing of why you may have a red rookie, but then have like a green champion and vice versa. So pretty much you have very good effects. You also have a wide array of effects to use in the form of the rookies. In both structure decks, you have a memory blocker and an effect play stopper in the floodgate effects, in the case of Tentomon and Gomamon. Additionally, you have filter effects in Palmon from the ST21 structure deck, which lets you draw cards when you pitch a card, and in the case of Biomon in the ST20 structure deck, it allows you to search for the top 3 and add any of your corresponding pieces that you want. Additionally, they are definitely separated by the fact of their cover cards, which focus on the Greymon line and the Garurumon line in the case of ST21. So as a budget buster, the key thing is if you find really cool dragon looking man on the front of the ST20 structure deck cooler, you might pick that up. Or if you see massively armored Wolf Doggo on the other ST21 structure deck, that could actually be a determining factor. For those people who may be laughing or not caring, the point is that could actually make the difference between someone playing Digimon or not, and I am not afraid to admit that. Now, also talking about it, having Ace Digimon in the deck is very important. We did see this with the starter decks of, I think, ST17 and 18 or 16 and 17. Sorry, it's been a bit of time. But both the original Wargreymon Ace, which was black, and the Middle Garurumon Ace, which was purple, was a mono-themed deck for beginners. But I do think the speed was not really accounted for in terms of getting people into the game. However, these structure decks definitely do manage to pick up the pace in ST21 and ST20. The main reason why is we have a very fluid strategy, which I'll talk about in a second, but the point is they've definitely incorporated speed and actually the metagame at the moment as we are getting closer to World Convergence as a reason to sell these structure decks, and I do think as a beginner, this is going to be very good for you. Additionally, when we look at the actual reprint contents, because I will say that the strategy is pretty solid for what you're getting, you do obviously need 2 of each starter deck in order to kind of fill out the full range. If you say you want fully access to the Wargreymon line and you want 4 copies, you're going to need to buy 2, and then vice versa for the Metal Garurumon, you will need to buy 2 of ST21. So yes, you will need to buy 2. So in actual sense, you should buy 4 of them. Just if you want to play the entire adventure archetype, it does help out. But besides that, you also have something I will mention later as the top end of it, but the strategy is very solid. Like I was mentioning before, your main line is pretty clear to follow out. You want to keep searching for your adventure trait cards. You want to climb to your level 5s, believe it or not, as your level 5s will be distributing the most amount of damage thanks to their way of adding alliance to many of your Digimon. When you play an adventure trait card, you give something alliance and then it can attack, giving it the ability to cause lots of damage to the opponent quickly, but also being able to, when your opponent tries to remove the level 5 Digimon, you blast Digivolve into your level 6s, which is designed to specifically catch them off guard and delete and or bounce their Digimon away. So it is a very solid and competent archetype in terms of being able to give a beginner the pretty straightforward aspects of what they need to do and giving them just enough effects to where it doesn't overwhelm them, but they do understand that they need a wide array of effects in order to battle against most decks in the metagame. When we jump into the quality of cards that I've already addressed, having multiple super rares, which is the rarities here, is pretty cool because you do get that in the form of both of the Angel level 5s and Angelwomon, as well as Magna Angemon in ST21, and then I keep saying Garurumon, it's Metal Garurumon. Metal Garurumon and Wargreymon are also super rares in the structure deck, so you have access to that. You also have some rares in the form of like Garudamon and your Agumon in ST20, as well as in ST21 Lilymon and the Gabumon. Additionally, I did want to mention this here, that you do have the ability to have chase cards in this product, which does actually boost its value a bit, being that you can pull the Chase Agumon or the Chase Gabumon, which I love their arts, but it is up to you if that's something you care about. There is chase in the actual starters, so very good. I did not talk about the scrambles yet, but I'll talk about them here. The scrambles being reprinted does make this starter deck or structure deck very good because you will be getting some really good staples entering the metagame so that you do have access to them here. It is kind of strange because they don't actually fit in as well, I think, to the adventure strategy, because the adventure strategy is all over the place in its color scheme. But I do think that as a beginning player, getting onboarded with very good staples like these scrambles can help you out in terms of trading people that may want your scrambles. But more importantly, if you switch to other decks in the future, which you most likely will, you will have access to these good staples and you'll have a plethora of them. So it's always good to start a collection as well as your actual deck building from that too. Getting into the final aspect of the budget busting aspect of the structure decks, why does the value of the decks hold or do they not hold? Well, the great advantage of this starter deck and structure deck system specifically is that the value will hold rather well. This is going to happen because of the fact that adventure is already a really important topic in terms of Digimon, because it was the literal thing that probably got Digimon off the ground instead, as it really kind of made it more an international thing to people, so people around the world care about Digimon thanks to adventure. So many people might just want to pick this up for nostalgic reasons. The second thing that makes it really strong is the fact that this actually is a very competent strategy. I do think that Bandai finally picked up the ball, like I said, and giving us a very good starting point for players, because this actually does give, I think, a lot of players the ability to just have a very functional deck that, although I do think eventually probably will be power crept, it does give them an ability to hit the metagame on like 2 feet standing, and also like pressure a lot of other decks because of the mechanics in the strategy. Like I said, this deck is definitely designed to get you started. Now it'll also be very rewarding to those who are good pilots, which I will mention later, but for the budget busting aspect doesn't really matter. The point is it's definitely worth picking it up because the chase cards also make up for the price point. If you do pull one, it is very solid. If you don't pull one, you still have a good strategy, which is ultimately the goal of a starter set for anyone who happens to be a new player. It doesn't really matter if you think you can buy the singles cheaper. The point is the structure deck itself offers you a lot, so when you have access to all the cards, it may save you money in the long run from actually buying all the singles. So, that's a win there. But capping everything off here for the final aspect of it is that there is future support already on the way. When BT21 drops, there will be more cards to add to your adventure strategy, that being the Where Garurumon line with the Garurumon and the Metal Greymon with Greymon that are a part of the adventure archetype. They will be also added to your deck. And then finally, the Secret Rare Tai Kamiya is another reason why this structure deck actually is pretty good at a budget buster, because this card may be expensive. I'm not going to lie, Secret Rares usually tend to be, and because World Convergence is our first international or worldwide release, it is important to understand that people might just collect Tai Kamiya because he is a very collectible card, and he's the first, I think, multi-secret, or there's actually a few multi-secrets, but it'll be the first multi-secret card of our new Dawn Age set, technically, like the new international release time. So, with World Convergence happening, Tai Kamiya might be expensive. However, if you did buy the structure decks, the adventure archetype and the hero archetype are the only decks that can functionally use Tai very well, and the key factor of this is that for a beginning player, it might be worth investing into ties as you get more money, but the key factor is while you're playing the game, your adventure archetype is already pretty strong. It will be up to you eventually to pick up Tai if you want to play, I think, at the highest tier events. That's just my opinion, but besides that, I think the deck is actually still strong without him if you choose to play it. The key factor here, like I said before, is that the structure decks are very affordable. For the price of about, I think it's $14.99, or I could be wrong, this is about $15. If you spend the aforementioned $60 on all 4 decks, you technically have an entire strategy you could play for a long period of time. Some people might say, oh, well, that's too much money. I do want to point out in other card games, especially since I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh player as well, that, sometimes staples can cost $70 to $100, and personally, I know some of my friends who happen to pick up cards like the Primite cards, which if you don't care, it's fine, but if you do care, my friend picked them up for $50 or $60, so if I could get 4 structure decks for that price with a possible chase card, I think I'd rather take my bet with the 4 structure decks personally, but that is neither here or there. The point is, for a budget buster, it's meaning that you will have to spend money into any hobby you play, but I do think spending that amount of money to get the starter decks or structure decks is actually very fair, and I actually really do champion them, and I will be showing other content for it. But the key factor is, for the final score that I want to give this structure deck and starter deck, they won't be getting actual scores, so I don't know why I said that, but the point is simple. Is it worth the money, or is it bust? And it is a budget buster. I think the structure deck's fantastic. I think for beginning players, this is a very great way to start the game. Additionally, I do think the reprints in the structure deck are very good for another factor I will just mention really here, which is the entire community. The entire community will obviously take advantage of the reprints of the scramble cards to make the pool of cards available to us a lot better. But like I said, guys, I'm closing the video off here. The main goal is that adventure structure decks, the ST20 and ST21 structure decks, are definitely a budget buster. I think it's absolutely worth investing the money into it to enjoy it, and I do think that as a beginner or even a long-time player, you will enjoy the structure deck and get your money's worth. But like I said, guys, that's all I've got for you today. And as always, this has been Brad from the Ed Army signing off. And for all of you out there, to sign on.